Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachari Nivasesha Sunyavari Astyacha Deshatari Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Punyavaridi Astacharesha Tarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Koda Nitai, Maya Poshashi Jaya, 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 Koda Nitai, Jaya, Maya Poshashi Jaya, Koda Nitai, Jaya, Maya Poshashi, Koda Nitai, Jaya, Maya Poshashi Jaya, Koda Nitai, Jaya, Jaya Topinata, Tulsinatha Jaya, Tulsinatha Jaya, Tulsinatha, Tulsinatha Jaya, Tulsinatha Jaya, Tulsinatha Jaya, Tulsinatha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Gauranitai ki jai, Shri Mayapur Gauranitai Mayapur Shashi ki jai, Shri Tulsinath ki jai, Shri Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj Tirabha Mahotsav ki jai, Shri Raghunandana Thakur Tirabha Mahotsav ki jai. Go Premanandi, Harinam Sankirtan ki, Brihat Madanga ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. All glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to Sri Guru Garang, all glorious to Srila Prabhupada. Oh, Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Name Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvasesha Sanyavari Pastachari Shatari Om Agyanatmirandasya Janananda Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Savajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savavadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinavan Gatpate Gopesha Kika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Vanamami Hare Priye Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevcha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Ye Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, good evening everyone. This evening the subject matter is service in separation. And I guess it's relevant because we've just had the most, for us, you could say shocking in one sense, and heartbreaking or heart-rendering experience of the departure of His Holiness Bhakti True Swami Maharaj, who was, as some of you know, was very involved here in the temple which I'm in, and here in New Mayapur in France. It was he who was the inspiration of saving New Mayapur when it was actually taken away by the French government. and he basically organized the recovery, or the, let's say, repossession of New Mayapur, where Srila Prabhupada installed Krishna Balaram, where Prabhupada also authorized the installation of Shri Shri Gaur Nitai, big marble deities here. The only set of Krishna Balaram outside of Vrindavan and ISKCON installed by Prabhupada. A very special place. We also have big deities of Radha Govinda Madhava. And Prabhupada spent 3 times he came here and gave many instructions. So this temple was very dear to Srila Prabhupada, and very, very dear to Bhakti, His Holiness Bhakti True Maharaj. So for us, it's a great loss, and his disciples, many of them, were also our great well-wishers here in New Mayapur, been helping us. Some of them have also passed away of coronavirus. So, service and separation. We have the experience, of course, personal experience of Srila Prabhupada, our ashraya, our spiritual master. For all of us departing, many of us never had the direct opportunity to associate with him. Some of us did. We also have the present situation in ISKCON where devotees are, for obvious reasons, are in various parts of the world. Maybe they are there for protracted periods of time, which they were not planning to do. Some of them are somewhat isolated. I was talking 2 days ago to His Holiness Janananda Maharaj, who for the last nearly 4 months now has been alone, more or less, in Manchester Temple. Of course, sometimes devotees come, but generally speaking, alone. There's no one else staying in the temple there. He's been the sole resident for almost 4 months, I guess. And like this, and devotees not being able to visit the temple in most cases, at least at various periods of time, and still may be the case. So in a sense, we're having another kind of separation, although nowadays, due to modern technology, we have facilities like Zoom conferences, internet, mobile phones, and so on, where we can contact, associate in that form. It may not be quite the same as the personal form, but it's still there. So there's certainly something very good fortune there. But in principle, there's also maybe a mood of separation from one's service, when many devotees who are, let's say, seasoned or regular Sankirtan devotees going out on the streets or wherever they go, visiting people, preaching, distributing books. Sankirtan may have resorting now to more through social media, communication, etc. But they may be hankering. I was talking to Sutapa just recently also, and he's just itching to get back out on the streets with Prabhupada's books and talking to people and distributing books. So there's another kind of separation from service. Once one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada a question. They were a Sankirtan devotee, but they were, for some reason, they were sick and they were unable to physically go for Sankirtan. And they asked Srila Prabhupada, does one still get the benefit if one is desiring to perform a service, desiring whatever that may be, and sincerely desiring to perform a service, but for reasons beyond one's control, one isn't able to actually enact that service? And Prabhupada said, yes, you still get the benefit from that. Of course, we may say that the public don't get that benefit, but that's another topic. But from the devotee's point of view, that desire, and in fact, we all, one can't say we all, but quite likely many of us have experienced that when we've been held back. I remember when I would go, many times we would get arrested on book distribution, and we would, be locked up for a little while or taken to the police station and charged. And then as soon as we got out, we were like 10 times more determined to make up for lost time than before to distribute Prabhupada's books. So sometimes this situation like we're in now increases our determination or our appreciation, determination for service and appreciation for association. Nice rhyme. Appreciation for association. You can note that one. It increases when we're in separation, and when we're, for some reason or another, when we cannot achieve that association. In reality, that's the case for many of us. We're working, living a long way from the temple in many cases. And maybe only once a week we get that opportunity of that right now, maybe not at all. But it can increase that favorable mood to devotional service. It also helps us to realize that ultimately we have to understand when the final test comes, we have to be, it's us. We have to fly the kite, as Srila Prabhupada said. We have to fly our own kite. Or sometimes he gives the example of a plane. You may be flying in format, in many planes flying in format, but the individual pilot is responsible, and if something goes wrong, no one else can help them at that moment, basically. So it's a preparation for the fact that when we leave our body, Krishna's there, of course, and depending on our consciousness, who we are associating with. And when we say association here, we're referring to the association in our heart, not only the association externally. We may be living in the association physically, but not associating in the heart so much, more in the mind, according to our mental condition we may be associating. But as far as the heart and the appreciation and the quality of association between devotees, which will protect us when the final test comes, or any test in life, like the present test now. It's easy for people to become very disturbed, even mentally, in this situation. Some devotees become almost angry or frustrated. It's not surprising, especially those who are disciples of Bhakti Maharaj, for instance. I was talking to several of them yesterday, and their various emotions which they're having to deal with. And anger is sometimes one of them. Anger, we're praying, and why is this happening? We're chanting, and why is this happening? Etc., etc. And it's natural individually for us to think like that or to feel like that. And there's a bigger reason behind all of this, because I'm going to read something now. It's kind of the reason behind it, but it's a little esoteric to begin with. We'll try to put it onto the plane of existence, more or less, which we're on after a little while. But we're going to start now. We're going to ask Raghunandana Prabhu to please, I hope that he got the message. I gave him a verse to put on the screen. I hope he can do it. It looks like it's coming. It's a pretty elevated verse. You would think, my God, why are we talking about this? And we'll explain before we start, in case you think this is too much for me. This verse is, you could say, what would we say? It's like the cream of verses in separation. This is a verse which is the most intimate verse, practically speaking, of all in the jewels of the various verses of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's also in Padavali of Rupa Goswami. There we will find it also. But this verse was a verse spoken by Madhavendra Puri. He's repeating a verse which was recited by Srimati Radharani. And according to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, other than Madhavendra Puri, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, and Srimati Radharani, nobody knows this verse. So it's not that we're expecting to be able to understand or delve into this verse in terms of the deep spiritual emotions therein. But by Prabhupada's grace, we can get a little idea why and how this is relevant to us in our own efforts to render service. So this is text number 197, Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila. And we can chant this together if you wish. It's a very important verse in many ways, and it appears quite a few times in various purports, and in other places in Chaitanya Charitamrita the verse appears also. So what I'll do, I'll just read it through, because we can't hear you. You can hear me, I can't hear you anyway. Aidina dayadanata he maturanata kadovalokshase Vidayang twadaloka kataram Naita Brahmyati King Karomyam Aidina Dayadvanatahe Mathura Nata Kadavalokshase Vidayam Tvadaloka Katarang Daita Brahmyati King Karomyam. We'll go through the word for word, please, Rasika. Synonyms, word for word. Very meditative words in this verse, which we can take with us this evening. I, O my Lord, Dina on the poor, Dayadra, compassionate, Nata, O Master. Oh, hey, oh, Mathuranatha, the master of Mathura. Kada, when? Avalokshase, I shall see you. Hridayam, my heart. Tvat, of you. Aloka, without seeing. Kataram, very much aggrieved. Daita, O most beloved. Brahmyati, becomes overwhelmed. Kim, what? Karomi, shall do. Aham, I. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Don't forget, this is being spoken by Madhavendra Puri. This pastime, which we're reading here, is taking place in a very special place in Orissa. This place is called Ramuna. Some of you may have been there. It's a wonderful place and very famous because there's one temple there called Shir Chor Gopinath Temple. And it was there that Gopinath stole a pot of sweet rice from Madhavendra Puri. And many other pastimes took place there in due course of time. But this is, in this particular instance, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taken sannyas and he's traveling now to Jagannath Puri, he stops at Ramuna. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, having heard this pastime from his spiritual master, Ishwara Puri, who of course heard it from his spiritual master, who was none other than Madhavendra Puri. So Lord Chaitanya is telling this pastime of Madhavendra Puri. So he's glorifying Madhavendra Puri's process of devotional service as the most exalted. And he said, only Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this is Kaviraj Goswami, Madhavendra Puri recited this verse again and again at the end of his material existence. And Krishnadas Kaviraj describes in the verse after, when at the end of his existence, this verse is also there in the Anjalila. And then the Kaviraj Goswami describes how, through this verse, Madhavendra Puri is revealing to us how we can attain the highest platform of love of Godhead. This verse contains the actual secret of how to attain love of Godhead. It may not appear to at first glance, but we may be able to understand a little bit about that as we go on. So the verse is the one you see now on the screen, which he uttered this verse. He attained the ultimate goal of life by uttering this verse. Well, not say by it, but the mood of this verse. It's not just a repetition, it actually is the state of his very conscious existence. O my Lord, O my most merciful Master, O Master of Mathura, when shall I see you again? Because of my not seeing you, my agitated heart has become unsteady. O most beloved one, what shall I do now? So this is the verse of Radharani and separation from Krishna, one feeling his loss. Krishna left Vrindavan in one sense, at least on the prakrit or the manifest platform, it appears that he left, but not on the actual real platform of Lila. He never leaves. When Krishna And Balaram, in the chariot which Akrura was driving them to Mathura, reached Akrura, what's now known as Akrura Ghat. He reached the banks of the river Jamuna, and they entered into the river Jamuna. They never left Vrindavan, they just remained there. And the Vasudeva form of Krishna, Balaram, continued on to Mathura, whereas the Vrindavan form of the Lord remained forever, always, never takes a step out of Vrindavan. But the devotees were in the mood. Again and again, we see this mood of separation. Lord Chaitanya, you could say, did the same thing in Navadvip. He plunged the devotees of Navadvip into the mood of vipralambha bhava when he took sannyas. Of course, in most cases, Lord Chaitanya's Leela, they were still getting, most cases, not all, but in most cases, they were still getting association regularly. Lord Ramchandra also plunged the residence of Ayodhya into vipralambha bhava when he accepted exile in the forest for 13 years or whatever it was. So sometimes this mood is to be experienced. It's something which in the material world is not very much sought after, this loss of relationship, because relationship in the material world is based on physical platform. It doesn't take us to the spiritual platform. It just remains. Material separation is just a material experience. It's just one of the two experiences of coming together and separating. And depending on the nature of the coming together and separation, one gets different reactions, different degrees of happiness and distress. But on the spiritual platform, both Sambhoga meeting and vipralambha separation are transcendental, ecstatic, say, interactions. However, of the two, let's see what Prabhupada says. We're going to go down, Rasika, to the second paragraph. We're not going to read the first paragraph. Second paragraph, please. Almost there, just another line or two. There you go, that's it, you got it. When Sri Krishna left Vrindavan and accepted the kingdom of Mathura, Srimati Radharani, out of ecstatic feelings of separation, expressed how Krishna can be loved in separation. Thus, devotional service in separation is central to this verse. Worship in separation is considered by the Gaudiya Madhava Sampradaya, which we're in, to be the topmost level of devotional service. According to this conception, the devotee thinks of himself as very poor and neglected by the Lord. Thus, he addresses the Lord as Dina Dayardra Nath, as did Madhavendra Puri. Such an ecstatic feeling is the highest form of devotional service. Because Krishna had gone to Mathura, Srimati Radharani was very much affected, and she expressed herself thus. She said, "My dear Lord, because of your separation, my mind has become overly agitated. Now tell me, what can I do? I am very poor, and you are very merciful. So kindly have compassion upon me, and let me know when I shall see you." Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was always expressing the ecstatic emotions of Sri Chaitanya, of Srimati Radharani, that she exhibited when she saw Uddhava at Vrindavan. Similar feelings experienced by Madhavendra Puri are expressed in this verse. Sometimes we get this experience too when we lose somebody's association, and we look at a picture of them, or somebody talks about them. It conjures up tremendous emotions in our heart, which are very, it's like painful feeling of separation. It doesn't evoke static experience, but rather pain. Therefore, Vaishnavas in the Gaudiya Madhava Sampradaya say that the ecstatic feelings experienced by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu during his appearance came from Sri Madhavendra Puri through Ishwara Puri. All the devotees in the line of the Gaudiya Madhava Sampradaya accept these principles of devotional service. This is very unique. Never before was this introduced. This is one of perhaps the most unique feature of Madhavendra Puri's contribution in our line. This feeling of vipralambha bhava, or separation from Krishna. It's not something which was experienced, or at least not revealed before Madhavendra Puri. Because Lord Chaitanya himself has taken the form of Krishna, Radha Krishna. Krishna has taken this particular form to experience this mood also. And thus Madhavendra Puri appeared before Lord Chaitanya to introduce this mood into our line. And we'll hear more about that in a minute. But we'll go on to the next verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. You don't have to put it on the screen, but if it's there, you can. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recited this verse, he immediately fell to the ground unconscious. He was overwhelmed and had no control over himself. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fell to the ground in ecstatic love, Lord Janananda took him on his lap. Crying, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then got up again. Exhibiting ecstatic emotions, the Lord began to run here and there, making resounding noises. Sometimes he laughed, sometimes cried, sometimes danced and sang. All ecstatic emotions were just bursting out of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Just by hearing. This is one of the things which evokes one's ecstatic emotions, or one's bhava towards Krishna, one's feelings towards Krishna. Certain objects, certain situations, hearing a verse, whatever it may be, causes this awakening within the heart. And in this case, this verse has created this reaction in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could not recite the whole verse. He simply said, Ai Dina, repeatedly, as he could not speak, and profuse tears were in his eyes. Trembling, perspiration, jubilant tears, shock, fading of the bodily luster, disappointment, moroseness, loss of memory, pride, joy, and humility were all visible in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's body. This verse uncovered the door of ecstatic love. And when it was exhibited, all the servants of Gopinath saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dance in ecstasy. When many people crowded around Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he regained his external senses. In the meantime, anyway, he goes on then, how Gopinath, the deity of Gopinath, was being worshipped, of course, and then the pujaris, the priest there, gave all the Mahaprasad, the kheer, the sweet rice, to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and how he also distributed that mercy to everyone else. You won't see it now, I'm just going to, give me 1 second. There we go. I'm just going to read a little bit now from, this is from, the Krishna book, the Gopis' feelings of separation. The Gopis, Prabhupada's commentary, summary. The Gopis of Vrindavan were so attached to Krishna that they were not satisfied simply with the rasa dance at night. They wanted to associate with him and enjoy his company during the daytime also. And Krishna went to the forest with his coward boyfriends and cows. The Gopis did not physically take part, but their hearts went with him. And because their hearts went, they were able to enjoy his company through strong feelings of separation. To acquire this strong feeling of separation is the teaching of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his direct disciples, the 6 Goswamis. When we are not in physical contact with Krishna, we can associate with him like the Gopis through feelings of separation. Krishna's transcendental form, qualities, pastimes, and entourage are all identical with him. There are 9 different kinds of devotional service. Devotional service to Krishna in feelings of separation elevates the devotee to the highest perfectional level, to the level of the gopis. Pretty, you could say, strong statement in the sense of, say, very giving us the eligibility to attain the highest perfection almost in progress here. Devotional service to Krishna and feelings of separation elevates one. But we've got to become eligible. It's not just a question of, oh, I'm feeling separation. It's a reality. It's an actual mood of ecstatic love for Krishna. Now we're going to do a bridge between this level, which I'm not on, maybe you are, I don't know. If you were, fortunately, he said, if I have any real love for Krishna, I would not be able to continue living. So when in that situation, they may come, say, to a platform where they're interacting with the world. Otherwise, the state of madness or the state of overwhelming ecstatic emotion would be their normal state of being. Generally, they're such great devotees when they preach like Srila Prabhupada does not manifest that very often. Prabhupada did manifest these symptoms sometimes, maybe not to the extent that we just read, but certainly at certain times where he could control his own emotions no longer. When certain songs were sung, when he was in front of certain deities, and so on like that. As people in this material world, when they're in a situation which really affects them, they also sometimes become overwhelmed with emotions. We can take the screen off, Rasika, if you wish. We're off the screen now. Oh, it's me, it's not you. Sorry. I thought it was you. So, yeah. They also become angry or, lusty or, freak out, afraid, completely lose control of their senses. But in the material world, it's the opposite. It's the same root. The interesting thing in the material world is like a reflection of the spiritual world. Everything we see, whether it's lust or greed, anger, emotions, separation in this case, has its pure counterpart in the spiritual world. It's a reflection in this world. So, this mood which we get, or this feeling of emotional feeling, when we become attached to something or another, an object, a person, something. And then when we lose it, how we become so affected. It's a reflection of the spiritual emotions. Well, it's valuable. It may not be essential in terms of our understanding, but it's valuable to read, for instance, the Nectar of Devotion, the various relationships, the various descriptions of ecstatic love, the different rasas, relationships between devotees, because all of the compatible and incompatible relations, all of this has its reflection in the material world. And when our material, say, efforts to adjust things to be happy are diverted or directed towards Krishna, it can awaken the pure or the original emotions in our heart. I'm going to read something which is from the book called Sri Shastakam. I think they're just compiled by Janananda Thakur. Sure. Vision. Yeah. And it's his and Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj commentary on the six Shastak prayers. So obviously the seventh verse, which some of you are familiar with, and you can repeat it with me if you wish, is the verse which you could say more than others at least, is directly related to service and separation. Yugaitam nimeshena chakshusha pravisha shunyaitam jagat sarvam govinda virahe. My Lord Govinda, because of separation from you, I consider even a moment a great millennium. Tears flow from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I see the entire world as a void. And we do get a reflective experience of this in the material world. We know when there's seems like time, they're never gonna come back. So we're waiting for somebody you love. And time seems to be stationary almost. Anticipation just holds us. And what to speak of the other emotions, and maybe we become hopeless, we become helpless, we may start to become very emotional, we may start crying, imagining something's happened. All kinds of things may come up in our hearts or our minds. It's reflection, the same thing the gopis were feeling, maybe not the same detail, but the same principle in their feeling of separation, or any devotee in genuine feeling of separation. Now, there's a comment here. The first one is I'll read by Bhakti Siddhanta. In fact, I'll only read Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj's comment. This sloka intends to point out that for the Jatarati devotees, and if you don't know what that means, that devotees who are mature in their practice, it is absolutely essential that he seek to experience vipralambha rasa. And so when we say mature devotees, we're more or less referring to devotees who are at least on the platform of a Shakti, free from anarthas. In the stage of bhajana kriya is not something which we can impose upon our heart. However, there is an aspect of this in our lives which we'll discuss next. But really, vipralambha rasa is something else altogether. It's the state of actual fully fulfilled relationship with Krishna, where a relationship is actually established. So one should seek that experience and not care for sambhoga. Sambhoga may mean meeting or enjoyment, specifically enjoyment, one's own bhoga or enjoyment. In the material life, viraha means separation, causes only grief. Whereas on the transcendental plane, it produces exultant ecstasy, even though it seems like acute anguish. Knowing or saying that this material was a reflection, it may be at least theoretically possible to accept that. Otherwise, it's very hard. How can one be placed into extreme anguish and call that the highest form of ecstasy? Are we being brainwashed? Maybe. One may say like that. But actually, because there's a reflection, that which brings great, you could say, which is awe. In this material, we'll probably use the word of sex life, for instance. Mundane sex life is the highest aspirational pleasure which most people obtain in the material. This is considered abominable from the spiritual point. There is sex life, but not that kind of sex life. Because the sex life of this material, where everything is based upon my own pleasure, my own satisfaction, whereas spiritual pleasure is based upon Krishna's satisfaction. Everything's based upon that principle. And this is where we come to the bridge. Vipralambha nourishes sambhoga or enjoyment. It nourishes it. It doesn't, let's say, obfuscate it or cover it over. It nourishes it. And as we said earlier, even the material world, to some extent, we experience that separation, makes the heart grow fonder. And when one meets, it becomes all the more relishable. As a matter of fact, in prema vaichitra, or variegatiness of love, within the vipralambha rasa, there is sambhoga, but only externally. Vipralambha is marked by incessant and intense recollections of Krishna and his pastimes. Incessant and intense recollections. It's not just something now and again, something we got to kind of work up to remember something. It's a state of the consciousness of the entities, completely pervaded. Nothing else is there except for intense thoughts of Krishna. Absolutely, totally, 100%. And his pastimes, and in fact, one never ever forgets Krishna. You can't get it. The gopis were trying to get Krishna out of their minds. Forget about this debaucher. He's happily situated in Mathura now with all the, The ladies of mature city, sophisticated ladies, what does he care about us coward girls now? And he's forgotten entirely about us. We should forget about him. Stop talking about him, will you? But they couldn't stop talking about him or thinking about him for a moment. Neither could Krishna stop thinking of them, but they were thinking. This is the super excellent stage of bhajan. Super excellent. We may, obviously, we're not on that super excellent platform, but this is now, how are we going to come to that? Or what is it relevant to us at this stage? The esoteric import of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes is that although Lord Krishna has accepted the sentiments of an ashraya tattva, or a pure devotee, that means one who is taking shelter. There's Ashruta and Ashraya. Ashruta is shelter. Ashraya tattva is one who's trying to take shelter of Ashruta. So Lord Chaitanya has taken this position also of Ashraya, or one who's taking shelter of this mood. He is always situated in the mood of vipralambha. Jiva is also Ashraya tattva. For him, to fully relish sambhoga rasa and give it full expression, he must take shelter of vipralambha, or the mood of love in separation. To propagate and exhibit this truth, Lord Krishna appeared as Lord Chaitanya, who is eternally the embodiment and incarnation of vipralambha rasa. Devotees should discard any notions of endeavoring for sambhoga rasa, since such an attempt will certainly end in failure. The eligibility, in other words, to actually achieve sambhoga or association with the Lord is not one of any selfish intent whatsoever. It's the unalloyed devotional mood that one will serve Krishna. You can do what you. The next verse in the Shikshastakam explains Ashlishava Padavatam. You can do what you like with me, O Lord. Crush me in your embrace, make me brokenhearted by never being present before me. You are completely free to do anything and everything you like, but you are always my worshipful Lord. There is no condition. It's the only condition is love or desire to please Krishna. This is the mood of vipralambha. And this is the mood of our acharyas, which is cultivated through the practice of following the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement. So now we're going to go a little bit to perhaps our situation. Some of you may have been here with us yesterday afternoon, or whatever time it was for you. It was afternoon for us in France. But we were also a little bit discussing similar features of this, of how a devotee cultivates this mood of separation. And it may be in the beginning that we're thinking, I just want, as we read yesterday from the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam about the situation of Queen Vaidarbi, who was previously Puranjan in her previous life, or Prachini Barishat in one sense. So he took birth as Vaidarbi, and her husband was Malayadvaj. And King Malayadvaj was a great devotee. He renounced his kingdom. They went to the forest on Prasti in Prasta, and there they lived practicing devotional activities. And then he passed away, as is the case for every one of us in due course of time. And Vaidarbi was devastated, crying, overwhelmed with lamentation. And Srila Prabhupada, of course, in the purports which we read yesterday, we won't read again, some of them. And those purports were describing the mood of a devotee when there's a spiritual master leaves the world. And it can be the mood of all of us, even if he's not left the world or a devotee hasn't left the world. But this mood can be cultivated. This mood of absorption in their association, absorption in the pastimes or the teachings, in their form, whatever it may be, being absorbed in their presence, in their heart. Again, this is related to when we leave the body, the mood of Madhavendra Puri. We cultivate this mood in regards to our spiritual devotional service also, the spiritual master, the holy Dham, so many ways, the deities whom we're worshipping,
and so on, a holy name. Like this, the Lord has appeared in so many ways. When we cultivate this mood, not that I want, okay, that may be there in the beginning, not necessarily bad, but the mood to achieve it, or the eligibility to achieve what I want, is this mood of vipralambha as it manifests. We could say it's not manifesting in a realized state exactly, but it's manifesting, it's present even in the Vaidhi sadhana, people have passed, in the sense that we're desiring. The spiritual master is present. Prabhupada said we should serve his vapu. When he's absent, we should serve the vani. So we're meditating on the vani. We're meditating on the instructions, how to please my spiritual master. We may not have realized it, but we know by his instructions, by Krishna's instructions, how we can please the spiritual master. In this way, although it appears to be separation, and it may be mixed with various emotions of various kinds, but it's actually associating with the spiritual master through vani. And that is very important. And Prabhupada said, actually, that association is more important than the vapu association. And when the spiritual master departs, we should worship that vani and find out how to actually fulfill the mission of the spiritual master. That should be our meditation. So this isn't quite the same, you could say, as that mood of Radharani or Madhavendra Puri, but it's the same principle. It is the path which leads to that. And sometimes Prabhupada would say to his disciples, there was but sometimes disciples, wherever Prabhupada would go, they would suddenly pop up. You know, if they were in Los Angeles, they were there. Then he flew to Montreal, they were there. He flew to New York, there they were. Then to Darwin, there they were. Then Miami, there they were. And to London, and there they were. Very nice, you could say, following the footsteps of the spiritual master. But Prabhupada said, at least in one, maybe more cases, what are you doing? Why don't you do something for me? Why don't you do some service? Why just following around like this? Do something. You know, when Prabhupada would come to London, I can't speak for everyone, but I know when he used to come to London. And now we see sometimes when the spiritual master comes to a temple or whatever, in some cases, maybe not yours, but in many cases we see that kind of things stop. Other things stop. Everything's focused on the spiritual master's presence and cooking for him, 200 preparations for lunch or something crazy, and things like that. But when Prabhupada would come, everyone would basically increase their service. Book distribution would increase. The world would be more, serious about the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. And that's what Prabhupada wanted. He wanted us to embrace, not that we should take every advantage of their personal association of devotees, every opportunity, but the association should be favorable. It shouldn't just be a sentimental kind of here I am type of thing. It should be one of wanting to imbibe the mood of the pure devotee and live by that instruction in one's life. So Srila Prabhupada basically give us directions as to how to advance in Krishna consciousness, how to spread Krishna consciousness, and the devotees would make their choices, of course, but sincere devotees would take that as their life and soul, as Prabhupada did, from his spiritual master. And this is how we really serve a spiritual master, or any devotee, whether they're physically present or not, but in the mood of separation. By not just when they're present, we're all good. We turn up to the temple, we turn up for Mangalarti. We yes, and we put on a good show, and for the rest of the year, we're not to be seen. Or when the spiritual master comes, and this is another one, is a little bit more, you could say, general, a little bit more common, the everything, got to get everything together, clean the temple, tidy everything up, do everything properly, paint the walls, get ready, get your act together. And previously we may not have been doing it. When the spiritual master comes, then boom, try to do everything properly. Then when he goes, may go back to whatever. But we should try to keep up the spirit, that flame burning always. Not that when the spiritual master leaves, then everything goes into disarray. but rather the disciple should take this now extra opportunity, responsibility to surrender, to take shelter of the instructions, to take shelter of the holy name, to take shelter of other devotees. And more reason to take shelter, ashraya tattva, to really live in this mood of ashraya tattva. And not that we go away, oh, it's all over. Those devotees who've never understood the real mood of the spiritual master may think like that. But those who've imbibed his mood, who understand the mood of the spiritual master, it's like Prabhupada. After Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj left the world, Prabhupada, he never for a moment forgot the instructions. Sure, he grieved. It's natural that we grieve. But at the same time, Prabhupada embraced the instructions and more than ever tried to fulfill those instructions of the spiritual master, because the spiritual master never leaves. It's like we said, Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. The sincere devotee, the spiritual master, they never feel he leaves. Govinda Maharaj one time when he said, Nitya Leela petitioner, when spiritual master attains his Nitya Leela form, he said, how do you feel? And he said, I don't know, that's not, no. He said he's here, he's still here right now. You may, whatever, Prabhupada says the pure devotee is simultaneously in that Leela, but he's also present here. So for the devotees of the Lord, he's always present with them. They never forget him. Prabhupada said, I never forgot my spiritual master for a moment. He had him in his heart always. It's like he's always there with us. This is the mood. And this can be awoken, developed by this process of ninefold devotional service. But by absorbing ourselves in what would my spiritual, what would Prabhupada, what would the pure devotee, what would they want me to do? What is their desire? This is how we can transform our consciousness away from wanting to satisfy myself to wanting to satisfy Krishna. I want to get some this mentality. That's the mercy of the Lord. Of course, there is something we want to get out of it. You could say that's love of God, and even more than that, pleasing Krishna's senses. That's what I want. I want to become an instrument of the pleasure of the Lord and the Lord's devotees. So this is the mood which we try to develop in our Sanga, in our association of devotees. Not just crying, oh, things were so good when Prabhupada was around, it's all blah, blah. This type of thing doesn't do anyone any good whatsoever. It may or may not be one's experience, but it does no good whatsoever. And we have to try now to think, what would my spiritual master want me to do now? He wouldn't want me to just moan and groan and cry. It doesn't do any good for spreading Krishna consciousness, or criticize, or just lament, or whatever. He wants us to, more than ever, to try to take on this responsibility to spread Krishna consciousness, practice Krishna consciousness, and spread it according to his guidelines. I'm just going to finish off here reading one or two letters and then maybe one or two questions. I'm sorry, I didn't realize the time had flown by. The spiritual master is present wherever his sincere disciple is trying to serve his instructions. This is possible by the mercy of Krishna. In your attempts to serve me and in all your sincere devotional sentiments, I am with you as my Guru Maharaj is with me. Prabhupada even said on one occasion, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj is always there to protect you. So we were protected by the Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj road in Mayapur, was even initiated. And to the Shivananda Prabhupada, you like to say, I really miss you, Swamiji, my Godbrother's association, so much. But I may remind you that I am always with you. And so wherever I am, there, and you are there, all your Godbrothers are there. Please remember always the humble teaching that you have received from me, and that will make you always associated with me and with your other Godbrothers. Shivananda was alone at that time in Germany once. To feel separation from the spiritual master of Krishna is a very good position. That means one who is in pure love with Krishna and his representative spiritual master, he thinks always of them. And this thinking process is Krishna consciousness. If we can think always of Krishna, even in separation, that is Krishna consciousness. And in the absolute position, there is no difference of separation and meeting. The separation is also meeting. Rather, in separation, one relishes the loving relationship more tasty. So don't be disappointed that you are separated from me. I am also always thinking of you and how you are making progress there. That was Sri Krishnadas, who was also in Germany. To Uddhava Prabhu, please accept my blessings. I am just in receipt of your letter forwarded from New York. Please be happy in separation. I am separated from my Guru Maharaj since 1936. I am always with him so long I work according to his direction. So we should all work together for satisfying Lord Krishna. And in that way, the feelings of separation will transform into transcendental bliss. The last one, to Shamsundar, you were expecting to see me, but I also expected to see the London Rath Yatra, but you have not made an arrangement, so what can I do? So let us meet by Sankirtan. I also do not feel separation from my Guru Maharaj. When I am engaged in his service, his pictures give me spiritual strength. To serve the spiritual master's word is more important than to serve him physically. Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So like that, we can understand the Lord and his devotees are always here. We just have to take shelter of their instructions, take shelter of them in this way. And that includes, of course, even their form, words, pastimes, etc., and their mission. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we've over time, but I don't know if you've got any time left. Maybe if you wish to ask any questions, you're welcome, more than welcome. Hare Krishna. Anybody still there?
Yes, we have a couple of questions here in Karuna Bhavan. There's Prabhupada Prana. I don't know if you can see him in the back. There are quite a few of us here watching you, so hopefully you'll be able to hear him.
Who is this?
So
I see all the wonderful souls gathered there. Hare Krishna, everyone. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Ram.
Can you hear?
can you hear?
Can you hear me?
I think so.
Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj, for that wonderful class. It's very relevant at all times.
Yeah. We've had enough shocks in the last few months to wake us up.
Although you can answer my question already, I just wondered if you can say a little bit more. So in the association of the spiritual master or a saintly devotee, we feel inspired, and sometimes we don't see there's much problem when we have the physical association of a great soul, but then when they go away, then that flame does tend to diminish a bit. So how can we keep that flame up?
Good question. Good point. It's not a new thing. It's something which we neophytes, you can say it's one of the aspects of the neophyte condition which we're in. Anishtita Bhajana Priya, where our devotional service is not steady or undisturbed by anarthas, of various kinds. We're weak, children on the spiritual path. So how to deal with that one? Well, of course, again, as we mentioned earlier, some devotees, they can't. They're just not ready. They just
it's all over, they just drift away and away they go. And that happens in the presence of the spiritual master, in the absence of the spiritual master. That may happen. But for those who are sincere in this endeavor, just that we're weak, there are beautiful verses which we can get strength from. There's one in 11, 2 or 3 in the 11th canto, chapter 20, I can't remember which numbers, which give us great, we can say, encouragement. Any instruction of the spiritual master can give us great encouragement. And this movement, as far as we understood, Prabhupada has especially facilitated or provided us this opportunity where we're supposed to churn this amongst ourselves, coming together and reminding ourselves, this is Istagosti. Istagosti is meant for that reason, specifically Bhagavatam class also, as we say, is to remind us of this, of the truth of the reality of our situation, reminding us of the will of Krishna, the will of the spiritual master, together, working together to help each other to not to become, let's say, lax in the absence of the spiritual master's physical presence, or a senior devotee who we get inspired by. And the idea is that we become inspired. Prabhupada said one time, you read my books very carefully and you become the inspiration by associating through reading Prabhupada's books, by associating, discussing it amongst ourselves, hearing his lectures, reminding ourselves of his instructions, etc., and so on. In this way, we can at least try to keep rekindling. We have to keep rekindling that little flame until it's really burning so strong it will not fizzle down. We have to keep feeding it. You know, it's like any flame. If you don't feed it, it's going to go out. And then all of us have probably had an experience of lighting fires with wood or coal or something. You know, it's not like just turning on electric fire. But actually, you have to keep feeding it. Otherwise, it's going to die out, right? Or water. If you don't keep putting water, it will dry up. It will evaporate. It's natural. So the association isn't just a physical one. You know, I've got my mind, you've got yours, and all we kind of associate according to our condition. It's to help each other to remember the goal of our life and the means to attain that goal. Hearing the pastimes of Krishna, hearing the instructions of Krishna, you know, just whatever. Prabhupada would write, whenever a letter would come, but that's something which you may not directly experience now, but you can still do it in other ways. But the whole time, wow, letter from Prabhupada, everyone gather around, and everyone become like really inspired, you know, hearing this letter. Let's get out there. Prabhupada wants us to distribute books and roll out the door, you know. It's reminders. We need reminders. It's like refueling tank. If you don't put more gas in or petrol in your tank, it's going to run out. You know, you have to keep filling it up. So we have to keep filling our tank. We can't just depend upon the strength of the spiritual master's presence, which may lift us up no matter what. We have to continually keep, maybe it fizzles down a bit, now with each other's association, build it up again. Strong kirtan, you know, reading Prabhupada's books together. Not just for 5 minutes. Sometimes you have to do it a little bit more than that and get absorbed in it. Get in there, you know, get in there and really chant. Even tonight you may have heard of the kirtan. 1 hour kirtan downstairs for Arti. They're dancing like anything. So, you know, it's just, you know, realize Krishna's giving us a chance now to realize, wait, come on here. Things, we can't take things for granted. This lockdown's, you know, showing us we've got to really bear that in mind, you know, we don't know what Krishna's going to allow. Maybe we won't be able to travel much now. We don't know. We've got to really take this to heart. Prayer, deep, intense prayer to the Lord. And maybe it can help us to become a little bit more sincere, not just depending on mechanics alone, or capacity, or ability, or just support from others. We may have to become a little bit more ourselves, a little bit more serious, and pray that we become, you know, whatever Krishna pleases Krishna. Maybe a little bit like that, but rekindling the fire, that must be done, especially in Scotland. This word kindling is quite common. So we have to, you know, rekindle our fires regularly every day. morning program is there. And all these things are to help us to keep fresh, and especially reading Prabhupada's books. And of course, following his basic instructions, minimum, but especially reading Prabhupada's books. And if we can read them together, can be even more powerful in igniting that fire or keeping that fire going, rekindling it, I'd like to say. Keep rekindling, recharging the batteries, refilling the fuel tank, whatever we want to call it, recharging our spiritual batteries. Right. Anyway, some things there. Some things are there. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Pray. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Can't walk from a front. Your back is a problem?
Sorry?
Walk?
Walk, I can be on my knees.
Okay, I was just getting worried. I see you crawling. I thought maybe you couldn't walk.
No, I can walk, thanks. With your walk. Yeah, that was great. Thank you very much. Very useful.
Association is there. Prabhupada wanted us to create an association and share it with others. We're not pure, so we're not going to expect, the same volcanic effect. But at least, we can keep going. Krishna will send as we're ready. He gives us the next, let's say the next chapter, the next page. We've got to read the page we're on, take advantage of the page we're on, understand the page we're on, and Krishna will give us the next page for sure. So whatever it is, we take full advantage, then Krishna will give us more advantage.
Thank you very much.
Krishna.
Atoksha has a question as well, Maharaj. If you have time, please.
Oh, that's yeah.
So, Maharaj, you mentioned in the class, thank you for a wonderful class, that we should associate with the heart, from the heart, not mind. So, does that work if only one of you want to associate from the heart? Or do you need the person to also associate from the heart for that connection to be there? Or could you associate with someone from the heart, with someone else who's in the mind, on the mental platform?
Sounds a bit mental to me. Well, I may have used the wrong terminology, but I think the understanding may be there in terms of mind and heart. When I say mind, I mean more in terms of our kind of like, it's my mind, Prabhu, it's my mind. You hear devotees say things like that. Prabhu, it's my mind. What can I do? Sometimes people say that to Prabhupada. It's my mind. What am I going to do about my mind? In other words, when we say mind, it's their karmic thoughts that we're controlled by, their karmic identification with his body. This is me, and this is mine, and this is my understanding, and this is my, that type of thing. So when we associate on that platform, it's amazing. Even the instructions for the pure devotee become subject to differences. They become subject to argue over the same instructions. Because they're saying it opposite. There's our condition, your condition, my condition. We're all conditioned. So that type of association naturally goes on, and it just keeps. Of course, it takes a darn long time for any change to take place, genuine change. If that's our basic association, talking about old things, talking about how I see it, there's a room for all that, no doubt. But it has to be guided, or it has to be directed towards getting free of that perspective or perception of devotee, or self, or Krishna, or the guru, or whatever it is, the deity. It's like coated with, let's say, our own samskaras, our own anarthas, and so on and so forth. Seeing through this veneer and judging each other, and so on and so forth, which is inevitable in a neophyte stage. That's going to go on. But the process which Prabhupada has given us, and the real association, and the safe association, as Prabhupada said again and again, the safe place is kirtan. Coming together with kirtan. Sure, we go in the kirtan, and no matter where your mind's at, you're going to have that there, and you're going to start looking at this devotee, like his kirtan, and the way they play the cartels, I play much better. All this nonsense crops up. in that type of situation, it can do. But I would say, just keep chanting, keep chanting. Nityananda Prabhu is very merciful. And if we try to spread this sankirtan, this chanting of the holy names, this process is the method Cheto Darpana Marjanam of cleansing our hearts of all these dirty perceptions which we're identifying within on a mental platform. So when we say in the heart, association in the heart is an openness to hear. It's not much. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, to change our hearts, all that's required is we have to open ourselves to hearing the sound of the holy name. It's not a question of trying to analyze it. It's a question of actually taking it. It's like medicine. You spend all day analyzing the medicine, but never take it. You know, is the medicine good? Oh yeah, I worked on someone and it's got this in it, that in it, this in it. They made it this way and that way. And we do this with it and that with it, and it has this effect. All very well and good, you could say, if it convinces us to take the medicine. But if we don't take the medicine, it's not much use. We have to take the medicine, and however mental we are, or however non-mental we are, whatever we think we are, we have to take the medicine of somehow or another associating and chanting the holy name of Krishna, or hearing the holy. It may in the beginning, maybe just a tiny little speck, but by association, good fortune gradually grows, and slowly. But if we really want to, from the heart, means we're opening our heart, humility, humble. I remember one time I was giving class in Vrindavan on the Sikshastak prayers, and it was Trinadapi Simichinatradapi. And I was trying to speak something which I'd heard from Shastra and here and there. At the end of it, one devotee, his famous devotee named Indra Prabhu, suddenly appeared, as he often did out of the blue, in the temple after classes. He came up from behind and he grabbed me. I thought he was going to crush me. He crushed me so hard. I said, "You got it!" He was going like this. And he was like so ecstatic. And he said, my realization of this verse of humility, of Trinadapi Simichena, I have no hope. I'm helpless. Just like the verse we read in the beginning, helpless. Without your mercy, I am helpless. Your mercy is all that I'm made of. It's moved that we don't have any eligibility to analyze the philosophy, to analyze. We may have to do that on a superficial or temporary level for the sake of keeping going, for appeasing this one and that one. But ultimately, our only hope is the mercy of Lord Nityananda, the holy name, following in his footsteps, taking shelter of the holy name, which means really, it doesn't just mean a mechanical one, which is great, that's also important. Essential as a foundation to the growth of devotional service. But it has to come to the point where we're opening our hearts, where this humility comes in. I'm not the doer, I'm not the controller, I'm not the controller of my sadhana. In one sense, we can say we are, but it's not like sadhana is going to lead to this. As Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, verse 6, purport, the awakening of our dormant loving affection for Krishna does not at all depend upon the mechanical process of hearing and chanting. It depends wholly and solely upon the mercy of Krishna. We've got to get that mercy. So when we're crying, we say, crying like a child. And at that point, we realize that we can try our best. But when it comes to that point, that's the heart. When we open our hearts, and then the holy name will manifest in its fullness, pure open heart. But as long as the heart is still focused on our idea of how to do it, we have to use that, of course, in practical terms and service, etc. But not in terms of absolutely that this is the way I'm going to attain, almost force Krishna to fulfill my intentions. No, it's when we become to that state of read the verses, read the songs of Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, read Markine Bhagavat Dharma. Markine Bhagavat Dharma, poem, prayer, song, Srila Prabhupada, is like to me, it's like the, what do they call it? when you make your, what was the word? You make your project, you give
Blueprint.
Huh? Blueprint, you could say. There's another word which we use in these days, which are, it's something, for your whole movement, this is our, foundational statement, so to speak. This is what it's all about. And that poem of Srila Prabhupada, it captures the entire mood of pure devotional service, the mood of a pure devotee, and the mood which I feel that we should try to, we can't imitate, but at least we can try to follow in that mood. It's so important. It answers pretty much all questions in one sense, of how to chant the holy name, of how to preach, of how to relate, of how to depend, and so on and so forth. So, first thing that Prabhupada wrote when he arrived in America, so it's very significant, before he wrote anything else. That was his first reflections when he arrived in the States. Very important to help us to get off what we call the mental platform. Sentimental, senses and mind, sentimental. To come a little bit more onto the, say, the transcendental spiritual platform of actually taking shelter of Krishna. And that's what the association of devotees is meant to afford, is to give us more and more an opportunity to understand it. We do have to obviously use our common sense in the sense that we're still under the modes, so certain activities under the modes we have to deal with, but ultimately this is the real cure. And if we don't have that in our society, if we don't put that in the forefront, we tend to spin around in circles for a long time, changing things, adjusting things, agreeing and disagreeing, discriminating, etc., unnecessarily. And sometimes after 50 years, we think, where have I gone? Where have I gone? I spent the whole time trying to adjust to externals, when the real answer is within my own heart. Within my own heart. To reflect within, to change maybe a little change in the way I see the world is, could do some good. But how does that can happen? Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj said, simply by exposing ourselves to the holy name. Just opening up to the sound. It sounds easy. We know it's not so easy. But that's the association of devotees. It's meant to help us in this regard. The devotional service which we're rendering, is to help develop this mood. You read in the first canto of Bhagavatam, second chapter. That's the process. Narada Muni gives the process also. But we develop a genuine taste for hearing Krishna Katha, the holy name. All of these various, whatever they are, we may not even recognize them as anarthas. We think that they're norms. We think that it's right sometimes. The genuine devotee, he always sees himself, and we have to responsibly act, etc., according to our duties. But in principle, he always thinks at heart, I'm fallen, I'm an offender, I'm wrong. And they never blame anyone, never. This idea of blaming others doesn't do anyone any good. We have to see it in our own hearts. What is it in me that needs to be changed to make things more pleasing for Krishna? Self-reflection. As we mature, if we don't do that, we just kind of hang in there for 50 years and wonder, where am I going? I don't even chant 16 rounds. I used to chant 16. I'm not talking necessarily about me, you, or anyone else, but this is sometimes what we hear. I can hardly chant 16 rounds anymore. And even if I do, they're damn lousy. It doesn't sound right, does it, after 50 years? I don't read Prabhupada's books much, and maybe we're health-wise, we have some issues. It's another thing that, in principle, I don't really want to go for the program. I don't like going on Sankirtan anymore. One may question, there's something wrong there. Is it the process? Well, if we think it's the process, then that's another thing. But the humble person will say there's something wrong with what I'm doing, and that they will open their heart to somebody. Please help me. Please help me. I'm in difficulty. I'm not. I don't think I'm pleasing my spiritual master. Prabhupada was so pleased when he sees devotees sincerely following, but he expects us to progress a little bit too. We need help for that. We have to be honest and open our hearts sometimes, and not just try to justify our situation, but to be open, to hear, be willing to accept the merciful guideline, sometimes chastisement, sometimes direction, whatever it may be, and help us to progress and to come out of this state. So that's what our association should really be leading towards, not so much just some kind of scratch my back, I scratch yours, or whatever, just to keep the thing going. But let's really go. Let's really move. Then automatically other things can fall into place. People will become attracted. Relationships with devotees will naturally improve. Naturally, will respect each other more. Persons who were previously inimical can somehow or another suddenly become friends on a realistic platform. One sees beyond the external faults that we carry with us, so to speak. And that's a little more maturity, and that has to come in due course of time. Has to come. All right, anything else? It's over. You can crawl back if you want. Yeah, question. No, I thought if there's something on chat, there's a whole bunch of written. No questions. Are you using a computer or a phone? That's a question. I'm using a computer. I don't think there are any issues with the speaker. That's an easy question. We can't hear anything. Well, I don't know what to say about that one. If we can't hear anything, spiritual life is very difficult. The first principle. I hope that some technological issue is the reason for that. But if we can't hear anything otherwise, then it's going to be difficult to progress. From Minneapolis, come on. What are you doing in Minneapolis? We were locked down in Minneapolis. I've been to Minneapolis a dozen times. That's not Pornendu, is it? You know Pornendu? My lunch is over here, so unfortunately. Oh, okay, you're not there, so you can't answer. Okay. There's a lunch break during work lunch break, I understand. I used to go to Minneapolis every year. Great place, preaching. Now the world revolution has started from Minneapolis, right? Wasn't it that fellow who had that? That was in Minneapolis, wasn't it? That man who was killed by that policeman. So that's creating another wave in the world now. Different waves. They're all waves which I feel are all waves which the holy name is going to be carried on to spread Krishna consciousness further. They're all part of, making that boat go out where it's meant to go to spread the holy name. Somehow or other, whether it's a lockdown or the protests or the whatever it is, political turmoil, whatever is going on, economics, whatever it is, it's all part of this opportunity for spreading the holy name. Okay, well, that's it, folks, I guess, although you're still all there and amazed. I guess you all fell asleep, that's why you're still there. You fell asleep in the session and couldn't turn on the computer. Make a little noise, Raghunandana, and wake everyone up. So we can save energy and turn off the computer. Okay, well, let's see who's there. Back to yoga, that's good. Academy. Haribol. Most of you I know, some of you I can see it in a far distant part of the world there. My God, what are you doing in Australia? What's the time in Australia? 3 o'clock. You should be in bed. What are you doing up this late? What's it going on there? Well, a lot of you are in Scotland, I guess. And some in Ireland. And Fiji. Come on, Fiji. dear. You don't know what's going on here. What's it coming to? Hare Krishna. Hari Bo!
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maharaj. Hari
We'll
Bol.
see you in the Scottish Highlands, okay? Scottish Highlands. You go out to the I have to go in quarantine in the Scottish Highlands, is it? If I come to Scotland? If I come, you're going to put me in quarantine?
Yeah, for 2 years.
Huh? Hey?
2 years.
Come on, man, tell the truth.
Definitely.
Yes or no?
Yes, 2 years.
Huh?
Yes.
What do you say? Yes? What's going on? I thought the lockdown, I thought there was no quarantine anymore. Yeah, I'm a dangerous person. You gotta watch me.
Well taken, Kshetra Sannyas here.
Dangerous, shady person, dangerous, dangerous virus, dangerous infection. Very infected. Be very careful. So what we're going to do now then? Say good night.
Yes.
Night. How do you say good night in Scottish?
Good night, Jimmy.
Right, that's not very Scottish. Good night, Jenna. Good night, Jenna. Good night.
Oh, that's very good.
Here, Jenna. Good night. One wee. You'll be all right, mate. Live in Australia. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Keep chanting and chanting and chanting and chanting and chanting and chanting and chanting. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo! Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Don't forget it's Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj's disappearance day today, and Raghunandana Thakur's disappearance day today. Great devotees, by remembering these great personalities, if we hear from them, from the right source, helps us so much to develop strength, confidence, enthusiasm, satisfaction in our devotional life. Very important to remember these great souls, even though they may be on a different level, a different practice of devotional service, spontaneous mood of devotional service, beyond their ability to understand, but still by hearing about them we become so purified if we hear with an open heart, not a judgmental, an open heart. We don't know, who are we to judge, who are we to say, but we hear from the pure devotees, and then our hearts become purified. So the tendencies, the various tendencies to, false discrimination is one of them. Gradually become purified, and especially the instruction to chant the holy name and hear the holy name here as carefully as we can. All the events cannot manifest the more we put our endeavor in that direction. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Haribo. Thank you, Raghunath Prabhu, and all the devotees in Karuna Bhavan. And we wish you all the best, and we hope that you remain forever locked down at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada and Kodin Mayapur Shashi, etc. But we also hope that we can go out and help others to lock down at their lotus feet as well. And that soon we can, whatever, if Krishna wants, if he doesn't want, we carry on the best we can. But that we can continue to spread this infectious Krishna conscious nest all over Scotland and England and wherever you are, in Germany or wherever, France, and Ireland and India and New Zealand and Australia and Fiji and wherever else in the America. Please take this opportunity. We offer our obeisances to everybody and pray that we can, try to help each other. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakapa Trubhyas cha Kripa Sindhu Vyeva cha Patinam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Haribol. Hare Krishna. Haribol. Goes to Prabhupada.